Oh, buddy. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Well, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I ain't got any oats for you. I'm sorry. Well, we'll see you again, all right? Have a good day. Hello, friends. David Vos here. It's a beautiful day here in Oklahoma. It's cold today, and but not too bad. The snow's gone. We're having a good day. Want to get back into this, do another video in this series. I think we'll probably do a few more because there's quite a bit more we want to discuss. And I know a lot of you are interested in this. And even though we've done some good videos and we put it together pretty well, there's still a lot of questions. All right. And maybe questions you haven't even thought of that I'm going to bring up. Because we want to know the truth. We're not trying to just put things together to make us feel better. We're not trying to, well, let's just put the date way into another 40 years from now, and then we'll just feel better about it, Or let's just come up with an idea and stick to it. Somebody, some guy named Newton had an idea. Let's just go with that. No, we need to know if there's any way to prove this stuff. So we're going to have to get out the big guns and really figure out what we're doing here. We've done pretty good up to now, trying to pull all things together. I think one of the things that we could say real briefly about why I think that we're on the right track here is because we have determined a few things that are probably irrefutable. Everybody agrees, and we know that this is true. One is that we have an astrological wheel, and there are 12 houses in the astrological wheel. And we know this is scientifically a fact. That the heavens revolve. And we've determined, I believe, beyond a doubt, that the Bible is talking about these aeons that go by. We said that there's a scripture in Peter where he says, a day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years. And I, in the past, have explained what Peter meant by that, because we've been saying now that a day is like 2,000 years, or actually 2,100 years. So why would he say 1,000 years? And as we said, that's because there's a lot of different ways to calculate it, but we're still talking about the same days. For instance, the clock is one of the instruments that we calculate. It has 12 hours. The calendar has 12 months. And the astrological aeons have 12 houses, 12 ages. But the reason why it gets a little difficult is because today we have a different clock. We have a clock that goes around twice. So there's 24. And we see that in the Bible when it says there's 24 elders around God's throne. So how could it be 24 and 12? Because depends on how there are different systems. Like we've talked about in the past, there was a system where they had 3 went around 3 times. And they called those the first watch, the second watch, and the third watch. And that's where we get the word watch. You can use the word clock or you can use the word watch. So 8 and 8 is 16, and 8 is 24. So when you go by the ancient system of watches, it's 8 hours. But it's still a multiple of the 24 or 12. Well, we have a system now where it goes around twice. So it's 12 hours to stick with the 12. But we've figured it out now to where we've got supposedly 12 hours at night and 12 hours at day. Well, you could still use a system of 12 for the night and the day. 6 hours at night and 6 hours a day. It just depends on how you do it. So Paul is using 1,000 years as one day because they'd gone into the Julian calendar, and they were using the 12 hours and the 12 hours. So therefore, there are 24 days in that system, or aeons. And each one's 1,000. 24,000 years, or actually 2,100. It's just rounds it off. So there's actually about 25,000 years. And what we've proven now, as we're finding these dates come out to actually 25,200 years, the actual time. And this fits with the 1,260 days being actually 12,600 at the bottom of the wheel. But the smaller form of it, the time times in half, with the 1,260. So it all fits together. There are these ages. We know this. And so the last aeon that we're going through, we talked about the heavens that are rolled up like a scroll, or they are passing by in the last several videos, because the stars, or the astrological heavens, they rule over. So this also explains why we're talking about the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of the earth and stuff like that, because we're never going to go to heaven and live in heaven. See, the earth's going to become a paradise. We're going to live on the earth. We're going to live in a body. We have to have a body. Even in the resurrection, there's going to be a spiritual body. So we're going to have a spiritual home. We're going to have a physical body. But we're, dealing with this carnal body right now. So we're never going to be disembodied spirits floating around, never having a home. Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you, that in my Father's house, he says, there are many houses in my Father's house. His Father's house is the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 houses. And so each one has a different house. I mean, there are 12 tribes, or there are 12 divisions of individuals that live in 12 different houses. And there are 12 gods that rule over and they each have wives. So there's 24 gods and goddesses. And this goes back to the Olympian gods with their wives and stuff. So if we can validate that, and I believe we've done that, and over the many, many videos we've done over the last, I don't know how long, we've discovered that the passing away of the heavens is the passing away like a scroll, and a new heavens and a new earth, meaning a new society ruled over by another astrological sign. And those signs really were the gods, and the stars ruled over the houses. And Daniel talks about them as though they're beasts. Starts off with Leo, and then Revelation says the next one is Virgo, and that's exactly as we have it. And then Revelation, you see the Scorpio, and then the Sagittarius, or the centaurs. They come up, the horses that with the faces of men, that comes up out of the bottomless pit in the book of Revelation, which is down at the bottom of the wheel. And this goes on and on. We get the beast that, Jonah talks about being swallowed up in the belly of the whale for 3 days, or the beast, the sea beast. Well, that's what we're talking about, this beast in Aquarius, Pisces, and Capricorn. That's the area of the sea, January, or John, that baptized Jesus. So we're all baptized through the sea. And that's the story of Noah. And we go through all of this. And it's a big, drawn out thing. It takes a lot of study to understand how you put all this together. But then finally Jesus comes along. And this is around spring, Passover, where the cross is, or the Passover, the crossover, where darkness becomes light. And the sun arises with healing in its wings, and we have this great dawning of the new day. Down there in the darkness, then, we go 3 days and 3 nights through the belly of the whale, and this is that beast that Revelation is talking about, a sea beast, a beast that comes up out of the sea. So, if we understand it that way, then we begin to understand that in the larger context, all these numbers have to fit this astrology. As we've said, if the whole astrological clock then has 12 divisions, then each of these divisions is an hour. So 1 hour, the last hour that from Christ down to our day is 2,100 years. 2,100 times 12 is 25,600 years. And that's the entire thing. We see in Ezekiel, the temple has 25,000 cubits, right? the outside of the temple, because, and then Revelation is 12 gates. This is the house that we dwell in, this physical universe. Revelation 21, the new temple that's given to the world after the 1,000 years. Also has 12,000 furlongs on one side and 12,000 furlongs on the other. And it's made of 144,000 stones, because it's not going to have a literal physical temple, but we are the temple of the living God. And the 144,000 will make up the walls of this temple. And anyone that's born into the world after the 1,000 years, or even before the 1,000 years, actually, will be born into this temple. See? And we will be, because the 144,000 are the only ones who receive immortality, because it says in Revelation, they receive the first resurrection. Happy and holy is anyone who has part in the first resurrection, because the second death hath no more authority. So therefore, there will be people born during the 1,000 years who will not be of the 144,000, but will still have part in the second death, or in other words, the physical death. But only the 144,000 will become immortal and will be that temple where God shall inhabit by spirit. And anyone who comes into the world will have to go in through the gates, enter in, and be born from their loins, and they will be the fathers of the next coming race. And there will be a great multitude by the end of the next 12,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, well, we're gonna go into that. But when I'm going through all this is this kind of give you an overview to see that this 2,100 years has got to be pretty established. We've come 2,020 years since the days of Christ, and we've talked about this particular star Polaris, which is going to go and be in its zenith at 2,100. So there's the 2,100 years, and we've now. So all the other little details that we've discussed, if they fit into this, then we've got a pretty good idea it's working. But there's more. There's a bigger reason why we have proven up to now pretty good what we're doing here. One of the proofs is that we've determined that everyone agrees that there are 2,300 evenings and mornings, meaning, that's a whole day. And it says it evening and morning because it's talking about the days of the sanctuary and the evening and morning oblation. But it's just to show you that that's what this prophecy is about. But it's 2,300 days. And we find from Daniel chapter 9 that these years that is in this prophecy is a day for a year. Because he says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. That would just be a year and a half. 490 days. But it turns out to be 490 years. And it goes down unto the coming of Messiah and the bringing in of righteousness, and, the taking away of the sacrifices and offerings that Christ did when he came to this world with his death. He did away with sacrifices and offerings. And all these things came to fulfillment, showing that it is a one day for a year. And according to the prophecy in Daniel, the 490 years is cut off from the 2,300 that's in the book of Daniel chapter 8. So at the end of the 490 years, we keep going until the end of the 2,300. And then we showed that there would be this last hour, which is 210 years. And we showed how the 210 relates to the larger scale hour of the 2,100. And that 210 years then added on to the 2,300 makes 2,510. And then there's that last 10 days of tribulation that you add on to that, that's talked about in Revelation chapter 2. And you have the 2,520 years, which is the entire 7 times that Daniel chapter 4 explains is the times of the Gentiles. And we know that they're a day for a year by the methods that we've just gone through. And I've gone through this much deeper in the past videos. But that's just a recap. So we're pretty good and square with where we're at. But now let's ask them questions. Let's see if we're right. Let's see if this fits everything. Okay, because there's some things that we haven't even talked about yet. Because I couldn't really get into them because we got to get this down in our mind and get a basic understanding before we can go into this even deeper. Okay? So, all right. We talked about Sir Isaac Newton. We're going to use him, see, because he's such a brilliant man. Well, yet, hold on. Sir Isaac Newton didn't say the world would come to an end in 2060. So it'd be, I think, disingenuous for anybody to say, oh, look, Sir Isaac Newton must have been a prophet. He must be so smart. We're going to use his date of 2060, even though he didn't say the world would come to an end then. He talked about a 40-year period of time after that, which works out well with our 2100. 40 years and 2060 makes 2100. But he also says that there'd be time after that, all the way to the year 2374 or something. And he keeps going on. He's got dates into the future. Well, what about Nostradamus? Nostradamus has got a pretty good track record. He predicted 3 antichrists, one of which he calls Napoleon. Spells it a little different. And remember, we have already said Napoleon's important because he came along in the year 1800, around 1800, and overthrew the Holy Roman Empire. And then he says the second Antichrist, according to Nostradamus, would be a guy named Hister. Well, one letter wrong. It was Hitler instead of Hister. Same with Napoleon. There was one letter out of place. He didn't call him Napoleon. He called him Napoleon. Okay? Well, this guy's Hister instead of Hitler. Well, we know when that happened. And remember what we said. This is not something we're going to get into today. But Hitler claimed to be the Third Reich. And remember that beast that was not, and yet shall arise out of the bottomless pit and go out yet into destruction. Well, we're going to find, and we're going to get to this here in a little while, Babylon's not destroyed until another 1,000 years from now. Or this dragon, we should say. Because if you look in the book of Revelation, it says, I saw the dragon, first, after already the false prophet and the beast is destroyed and thrown into the lake of fire. Never to ever come back out. Yet, and then there's this angel that comes down and grabs the dragon, throws him in there too. But at the end of 1,000 years after that, that's into the future now, he's let loose out of his prison. Oh, prisons have keys, don't they? And there's an angel that has the key to the bottomless pit. We're going to find out that that's Peter. And, well, originally Peter, well, Jesus received the keys because it says in Revelation chapter 1 that Jesus said, I have died and I have overcome death, and now I live forevermore, and now I have the keys of death and Hades. Because as we've said, Hades is the god of the underworld, and he's got the key, right? Poseidon had a trident, Zeus had a thunderbolt. Hades had got a key. He's got the keys of death and Hades. Well, Jesus conquered him and received the keys of the kingdom. He's got the keys to whatsoever he binds on earth shall be bound in heaven. He can give you life or death. He is the God who has the keys of the kingdom. And when he left this earth, he gave them to Peter. Well, Peter gave those keys because remember, the apostle Peter, we'll find out, and I don't know that we'll get to all of this in this video, but there are 7 angels, and each of them have the keys. There are 7 angels. And remember, Jesus is the one who has the 7 stars or the 7 angels in his right hand. Jesus is not one of the angels. So there are those like Jehovah's Witnesses and certain ones like Seventh-day Adventists that say, oh, well, Michael, the archangel, is Jesus. No. Michael is an angel. Yeah, an archangel, yes, indeed. But he's not Jesus because Jesus has the 7 angels in his hand. And so there are 7 that hold the keys of the kingdom. And the first angel rules the first 1,000 years of this last history of last 7,000 years. And the second, well, I'll tell you right now, the first angel was Adam. The second angel is Gabriel. And we'll get into that at another time because I've got so many other things I want to get into. But suffice it to say that the last angel or the last person to receive the keys for the last 1,000 years is Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith received the keys from Peter. And he used those keys, the keys of the kingdom, to bind the dragon. Now, how in the world, what, Dave? You're telling us that Joseph Smith, this guy we've never heard of, this prophet you claim, and he's got this church, Mormons, and they're all polygamists, and they're all, no. We've tried to explain. Go back, some of the the videos that we've been doing. Excuse me. But Joseph Smith has nothing to do with this church called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was led by a man named Brigham Young, who murdered Joseph Smith, ripped out pages in the Doctrine and Covenants and Book of Mormon, which said don't be a polygamist, and they wrote one in and said do be a polygamist. That's why they murdered Joseph Smith, because he refused to let them have their wickedness. And they could see that he had a lot of power, and they wanted that power, just as Simon Magus wanted it when Peter was on the earth. Well, Brigham Young demanded that Joseph Smith's work was coming to a close. So Joseph Smith was told by the angel it was time and that he'd finished his work. And he used the keys to start the restoration of all things, and he dedicated that land in Palestine in 1841 so that the restoration of Israel could return. And they did after that. And he did other things, but he also bound the dragon. The dragon means the 7 heads of the beast from Babylon all the way down to England. So this present governments with these 7 heads that have been ruling over us, the present world system, was going to be thrown down. Now we don't have the right of the kings. We don't have the Pope ruling over us. We have a democracy. We have the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And the new country, and he dedicated this land for the gathering of the saints. And it shall be, this New Jerusalem shall be built by the gathering of the saints. And the gathering of the saints is 144,000, or the children of Israel, who are in all the lands and all the earth and all the tribes. They're everybody. And this temple, this new temple, is built of 144,000 stones. And it is now, we are being gathered to this. And this is the last hour. And so you read in Revelation chapter 20, I saw an angel coming out of heaven with the key of the abyss. And a chain was in his hand, and he seized the dragon. So who is this angel? Well, he's one of the seven angels. If you go back to chapter 9 of Revelation, you'll see a 5th angel blew a trumpet, and a star had fallen from heaven. Now that's a little weird there, right? That's not an angel. That's a star that fell from heaven. And it says to him was given the key to the abyss. And then if you look in verse 11 of chapter 9, it says, and the king over the abyss has the name Abaddon. We've said what that means. In Greek his name is Apollyon, which means destruction. Apollos was the dark sun at the bottom of the wheel, who ruled over the 6 houses on the bottom. And so, therefore, he has the key to the bottomless pit. And Abaddon is the way you say it in Hebrew, which would be Abi, Father, Adonai, or Yahweh Adonai. So, Father Adonai, that's the Hebrew God. He is the one, is the same as the Sumerian Ea Enki, who built the garden, who denied Adam and Eve eternal life and the tree of life, and did all the things that Yahweh does in our Bible. And he's the one that ruled over the abyssos in the Sumerian, the Abzu, the abyssos, or in Hebrew, the abyssos, and they translate it here, the abyss. So Yahweh has the key to death and Hades because he has the law. And so there was a period of time where we had a government, and there was one person who holds the key to your life, to the government of this world. He was appointed to that. But you see, when Jesus came to the world, he went down into hell, and he says in Revelation chapter 1, he says, I am the living one. I became dead, but look, I am living forever. And I have the keys of death and of Hades. See, the key is the key of Hades. Hades is the one that's got the key. That's the Greek rendition of Yah, or Yahweh of the Hebrews, or Abaddon, or Apollyon, or whatever, in Greek. Apollyon had the key to the bottomless pit because he was that dark sun that went down under the bottom of the wheel. But sometimes in Greek they said it was Hades. They had different parables. But anyway, Jesus said, I died, I went down there, and I conquered, and now I have the keys. And then you read in the New Testament where Jesus says to Peter, who am I, Peter? And Peter says, because he has this great revelation, same revelation that we all got to get, that Christ in us. We got to know who Christ is, who we are. See? And so Peter looks at Jesus and he says, you are the son of Yahweh? Nope, doesn't say that. Jesus never mentions Yahweh, never serves Yahweh. All he does is says, your God, talking to the Judeans of the Sanhedrin. He says, your father's the devil. He's a liar and a murderer from the beginning. But he says, my father's from above. And he calls him Uranus all the way through the book of, the New Testament. Uranus, the god of heaven, Anu in Sumerian. So, the heavenly God rules in the heavens. And the sun rules all 6 houses on the top of the wheel. And Apollyon rules all 6 houses on the bottom. So, when Jesus asks Peter, who am I? And Peter gets that revelation, it's because he says, nobody could reveal that to you but the Father. That revelation came from God. You are someone very desirable, O Peter, just like the angel tells Daniel, O desirable one. After 21 days, he fasts in sackcloth and mourns, and he receives the vision, which is a tiny little prophecy of the 2,100 years that we're living under, or the last 210 years, that we're going to be in sackcloth waiting for the end of the vision. But as soon as Peter realizes this, Jesus says, you are Peter, which means Petra, or stone. He says, and upon this stone I will build my church, which means I will gather. Remember, the stone is for the building of the New Jerusalem. The stone that the builders rejected was Christ. He's the capstone, right, on the very top. And then going down, you've got 3 and all the way down to the 144,000 stones. So it was on that stone that he's going to build the gathering. By the gathering, that's what Joseph Smith says, is that the New Jerusalem shall be built by the gathering of his people. And it's where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name. There I am in their midst. And so, each in his own rank, from the top to the bottom, they're gathered as living stones, being built up a living priesthood, according to Peter. And so, he says, I'm going to build my gathering. I'm going to make this gathering, build the church. No, I'm going to make a gathering upon this one stone, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail. Well, don't you understand? Gates require keys to open. There's a gate to hell, and you got to have that key. And he says to Peter, I give you the keys of the kingdom, that whatsoever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatsoever you bind on heaven shall be bound on earth. See, so Peter received the dispensation of that kingdom. He said, well, Jesus received the keys, Dave. What do you don't give out? Peter, oh my goodness, you blasphemer. No, Jesus is God. Okay, he's got all the 7 angels in his hand. But there is one angel that comes down who has the key in his hand because he was given the key. And that's Peter when Jesus gave him those keys. But in the last dispensation, Peter came and gave those keys to Joseph Smith. And so, we know that's true because who else? No one else. This is already been written. There's nothing you can do about it. Right? This has already happened. The people are going back unto their land. It's been dedicated. The restoration has begun. And the dragon is bound. Oh, I know there's still a false prophet coming. And the beast is going to come up out of that bottomless pit for a very short time. And they'll be thrown into the bottomless pit, into the lake of fire. But there's still another 1,000 years after that. And the dragon's let loose again. So someone else is going to have a key. Well, at the end of the 1,000 years, we have a Gog of Magog that comes up, and they surround the breadth of the camp of the holy ones. The camp of the holy ones is 144,000. The gathered ones, right? As we've been saying, the ones who have gathered. They're the gathering of the saints. That's the temple of the living God. We are the temple of the living God, being built up as precious stones. Starting with that stone, Petra. So Gog of Magog then takes us back to Ezekiel, the 38th chapter of Ezekiel. Well, in Ezekiel, we find that there is the restoration of Israel in chapter 37, 38. Then it says, and you're going to build a temple. And they build the temple, and then it's going to be an eternal, everlasting thing. Remember, we said the 10 Commandments, the whole law of Moses is everlasting. It was an everlasting covenant. It's just that we're not under it. We're under another everlasting covenant, the one that's in the new covenant, or the one that was the original covenant that God gave us in Genesis chapter 1, not Genesis chapter 2, where Yahweh makes the form and curses the land and all that. But that which is last shall be first, and that which is first shall be last. So our original estate was in Genesis chapter 1. We were made male and female, made he them, in the image of God. And so we go back to that which is spiritual. That's the first resurrection. See, because we've already had the first death and the second death. And then we get the first resurrection, which is spiritual again. So that the second death hath no more authority. And that means that we're immortal again. And so the ones who have that first resurrection are the 144,000. The rest of mankind don't. So as the temple starts getting built now, as we're speaking, being built up unto a living priesthood, a holy temple for God to inhabit by spirit. Well, at that time, there's still another 1,000 years to go. And so the nations are still around about, Gog of Magog. And they will see that they have been gathered out of their lands and they're dwelling in peace. And then he says, and I'm going to bring Gog of Magog upon you in the final part of the days. Well, that doesn't happen until the end of the 1,000 years, because it says right here, and he will go out to mislead those nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and gather them together to war. The number is as the sand of the sea, and they advanced over the breadth of the earth and circled the camp of the holy ones. And fire came down out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil who was misleading them was hurled into the lake of fire, where the beast and the false prophet already were. Because you see, the beast and the false prophet, the Antichrist, is in our day. He's going to shortly, with the coming of the Messiah, at the beginning of the Millennium, be thrown into the lake of fire. But the Gog and Magog's still coming. And so that's why Nostradamus didn't predict the world would come to an end in our day, but way down in the year 3000 and something, 3000, I forget 3000 something. 3,779, I think, is the date for the end of the world according to Nostradamus. And Newton did not predict the world would come to an end in 2060, but 2000, something like 400 or whatever. It's a long time from now, because they saw that there were lots of things that had not yet been fulfilled until the final part of the days. So we know then that we're in the time of the end, because we're in the restoration of all things, where people are going back to their lands. And the land was dedicated by we know who. And so we're about to receive that beast which comes out of the bottomless pit, which is the blasphemous Pope who spoke blasphemies and already did that for 1,260 days. He's been going long since the Holy Roman Empire was created in 800 and will end in 2060, the 1,260 days. And then he's going to receive this last little authority, because remember, the last hour, it says that the last hour is not clear down to the end of the 7 horns, but it says the one who, there's 5 kings, 5 have fallen, one is, the others yet to come. That present moment, the one who is France, who destroyed the papal authority, the temporal power of the Pope. And so it was after that he says, I saw an 8th head who was but is not at the time of the 6th head, but yet shall arise out of the bottomless pit and go off into destruction. And that is the false prophet and the beast that we're about to witness, that's coming at the very end of the 2060. Somewhere around there. We don't know the day and the hour, but we're just giving a general idea here. So I'm not trying to get into exact dates and moments and, But generally, we can see that what we've been coming up with, what we've been laying out here, is according to this scripture. But there's more that we didn't understand. Because in the book of Ezekiel, they build this temple, but that's not the final temple. That's not the temple that we see in Revelation 21. Revelation 21 says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The former earth had passed away, and the sea is no more. There's no more sea, and there's no more sun, because the Lord God is our sun. And there's no temple. Wait a minute. No temple? I thought he's going to rebuild the temple in Ezekiel chapter, 44. He starts building the temple in Ezekiel. Well, because the temple that's going to be rebuilt is at the beginning of the 1,000 years. But this New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven doesn't come down until the end of the 1,000 years. See? It says, and the sea gave up those dead in it, and the death and Hades gave up those dead in them, and they were judged individually according to their deeds. And this is all at the white throne judgment, from which heaven and earth had fled away. This is a whole nother age. And it says, the devil who had been misleading them was hurled into the lake of fire and sulfur, where both the beast and the false prophet already were. And that's when you see the great white throne and the judgment and heaven and earth passing away, and the dead being judged, and Hades was thrown into the lake of fire. So there will be no more Hades. And whoever was found written in the book of life, at that point, remember, the 144,000 have already gotten immortality. So at the end of the 1,000 years, now the great multitude can receive immortality. The children of the 144,000. Because they've entered into the gates. And there's 12 gates. So they've entered into one of the tribes, being the children of the 144,000. But there may also be people that are, obviously, if there's going to be a Gog and Magog at the end of the 1,000 years, then some of the people, when we go through this great destruction that's coming, like it says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. The flood came and swept them all away. So we know the 144,000 get the victory over the beast and his image. But evidently, there will be others who will survive this great Armageddon that won't have immortality. And they'll be living in the earth, and they'll be watching, and they'll look at these great individuals who have immortality, and they'll probably think of them as some, as prophets. Because remember, these angels, you say, well, come on, Dave, these angels can't be Peter, and that's a person, that's a human being. I mean, these angels are from God's throne. They're glorious beings. 22, when he sees this great river of life and the new kingdom that's coming after the 1,000 years, he says, I, John, I was hearing these things, and I'd heard, and I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel that had been showing me these things. And he tells me, the angel tells me, be careful. Do not do that. Because what I am is your fellow servant, and of your brothers who are the prophets. He's saying, I am just another servant, another human like you. I was one of the prophets. I was one of I was your brother. John is a great man. almost equal, basically, to this angel that he's speaking to. And he's going to bow down to the angel because he doesn't understand. This guy had already died and was one of the 7 angels to stand before the Lord of the whole earth. You see? So he says, don't do that. I'm not any greater than you are. John, you're a great man. Daniel, oh, Daniel, a very desirable man you are. Well, who was talking? Who was talking to Daniel? Well, it was Gabriel. And he says, the greatest of the angels was Michael. Who's Michael? That's Adam. We'll discuss that in another video. So there's Adam, and Gabriel was Noah. And the 6th angel is Peter. And the 7th angel was Joseph Smith. And these people, these angels, had living lives. They lived on this earth. They are our brothers. We don't worship them. Because, even Jesus, when they tried to worship him, they said, oh, good teacher. He says, good. Nobody's good but my Father in heaven. You see, he didn't want people to bow down to him either. Even though he was the Lord. And the Bible calls him God. And he emptied himself and took on the form of a man. Because of his humility. He did not want others to worship him. And he told us all, he says, I am not your master. He says, a servant doesn't know what his master is doing. But I've told you all things that I'm doing. I have called you my friends. See, we're all his brothers. This is why it's saying here, I'm just your brother. Because this is the family of human beings. Nobody's your brother but a member of the family of Adam. And so this angel says, I am a member of the family of Adam. That's what he's saying. I am of your brothers who are the prophets. Don't worship me. So, this temple in Ezekiel that's built is not the same temple, because the one in Ezekiel, they're still sacrificing animals. Well, what are they doing sacrificing animals in the 1,000 years, Dave, if the 144,000 are going to be the priests? Right? And they're immortal and they're servants of Christ. Right? They've accepted the faith of Jesus and the commandments of love. And they've got their white outer garments. They're the virgins, right? They're not women virgins. They're virgins, meaning that they have not, like that whore, had illicit relationships with the kings of the earth. But they serve Christ only. They serve each other in this great brotherhood. So, they didn't receive the mark of the beast or worship his image. They came to life and ruled for 1,000 years. So why then is Ezekiel's temple during this 1,000 years? Because remember, Revelation 21, the new temple is not done and is not made until after the 1,000 years. So for the first 1,000 years, we've got this Ezekiel's temple, and they're sacrificing animals. And these 144,000, they're Christians, and they're the ones that are priests. So I don't get it, right? Well, the answer is this. Jesus comes at the end of the year, 1,260 days, to cleanse the sanctuary. And at that time, in order to make the cleansing, we talked about it yesterday, he has to sacrifice the goat Azazel. Because that goat is where all the sins of the world is transferred to the dragon, the beast, the devil, and he's sent into the wilderness. And all those who are obstinate and will not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved, they receive the bowls of wrath and the wrath of this God. And the only way, according to the book of Ezekiel, he says, I'm gonna make a new covenant where there's going to be peace. Ezekiel chapter 34 says that even the animals won't be killed anymore. I'm going to have a new covenant of peace. And my servant David shall be leader and ruler over all of them. And I'll make a kingdom, and David shall sit upon the throne, and he will rule forever. And I'll make a kingdom And I'll have a new covenant of peace, even with the animals. And yet, and Isaiah talks about when this restoration fully gets here, then the lion shall eat straw like the bull. And the lamb shall lie down. Well, the lamb shall lie down with the wolf, and the lion shall eat straw like the bull. So there will be no more, they will do no harm in all of my holy mountain, not even the serpent. Because it says that a little baby shall play in the hole of a cobra, and he shall do no harm. There will be a new, peaceful, beautiful earth. But that doesn't come till the end of the 1,000 years, because it says in chapter 21, it says, the former earth had passed away, and his sea is no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And it says, the tent of God is with mankind. He will reside with them, and they will be his peoples. God himself will be with them, and he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither will it be mourning, nor outcry, nor pain anymore, for all the former things have passed away. So you see, the suffering will be gone. No more death at the end of the 1,000 years. During the 1,000 years, we still have people coming along, and they're going to gather together in this great war with Gog and Magog. Satan will be let loose out of his prison. He'll gather up the unrighteous on the earth that's still on the earth during the 1,000 years and come for the great war. So what's this temple? Well, remember, in order to make mankind cleansed, people are going to be born into this priesthood, into this holy temple, and they'll enter in through the gates. That's where they'll have protection, with 144,000 on Mount Zion, if they keep his commandments, which is love. The rest of the nations, they haven't got salvation yet. See, they're just out there observing, and they haven't made a decision yet. They don't know. They're not ready yet. Their garments are not white yet, because they won't receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. They haven't got faith. They still got fear. They're still threatening judgments. And so, therefore, Jesus comes and sacrifices the goat Azazel. So that because he's that priest that's in the temple lighting the candles, right? Which is within you. And he, being the high priest that enter into a tent not made with hands, in this most holy, which is in this temple, which is the temple of the living God, which is your body. He is that great high priest. And so, when the Antichrist arises, he's not going to be, Jesus said, I have come in my Father's name. But when he comes in his own name, and he says all the way through Isaiah, I am Jehovah, and the nations shall know, the book of Ezekiel says this, and the nations shall know that I am Jehovah when I sacrifice this great sacrifice. And all the nations shall, and there'll be like a big sacrifice, like the he-goats and like the lambs. And there'll be a great sacrifice in Bozrah. And there'll be a great sacrifice in Babylon and Egypt and Edom and, Ammon and Moab and he mentions all these kingdoms that will all be perishing because they wouldn't go up to the Lord's house. They wouldn't worship Christ. Now, does that mean that Jesus kills people because he hates people? No. It means that if you receive his grace, then there's no condemnation in those who walked after Christ. But if you refuse his grace, they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. Then he sends the strong delusion, and they get to believing the lie. And this is what's evidently happening with many peoples on the earth during the 1,000 years. They're still involved with Gog and Magog, and we're going to find out who Gog and Magog is. And so they build this temple, and they have to make a sacrifice in that temple. And the sacrifice is that, not this time, it's not Jesus. Jesus took away the sins of the world. They put their hands on him, and they transferred all the sins of the people onto Jesus. And when he died, he took the sins of the world. But there's one other goat, which is at the Day of Atonement. There's two goats. And that goat at the Day of Atonement, they put the sins of the people on that goat and transfer all the sins that Jesus took off of you and all the sins that Jesus bore on his own body on the cross, and they'll put it on Satan, the Antichrist. And they'll make this one great last sacrifice in that temple that is spoken of in Ezekiel 48. But this time it'll just be for one last time to send all the sins, because Jesus already took everybody's sins. You see, but he don't deserve it. So justice will be served, and it'll all be put onto the head of that goat Azazel, the scapegoat, which is the Antichrist. And so that great last sacrifice is the Antichrist, and all those who partake of his kingdom, or all those who worship him and receive the mark upon their head and upon their forehead. So during this time, they'll build a temple there in Palestine, and they may go ahead and eventually bring sacrifices back. And then this Antichrist will appear, and you'll bring in this image unto the beast and defile the temple. And when Christ returns, Christ himself, as the great high priest, will put all of the sins of all of the world where it belongs, upon the head of the Antichrist, and the false prophet and the beast will be murdered, will be executed as a great sacrifice. And then Yahweh says, because they didn't keep his laws, he says he's going to make a great sacrifice, and all of these nations are symbolic of these lambs and he-goats. And in Ezekiel chapter somewhere around 38 or 40, I think 38, he tells you who Gog is. He says Gog, in the area in the land of Bashan. Who's Gog in the land of Bashan? Well, if you go back in the Old Testament, you'll find that Og was the king of Bashan in the land of the north above Israel. And he was the last of the Rephaim, or the Nephilim. And so he is the great leader of the fallen angels who made the pact on Mount Bashan, which in the New Testament is called Mount Hermon, where Jesus went and took his disciples and said, when he asked Peter, who am I? He says, you're the Son of the living God. Well, standing behind him, because they were standing at the base of Mount Hermon there, was this big temple to Pan, the devil. And he says, there's a big hole in the rock there that goes down, and nobody knows the bottom. And it's called the gates of hell. It's there today. You can go look at it. And Jesus stood there on that spot and said, this is the place where Satan came down and made the pact and created the beast, or the governments of the world, and their 7 heads. And he says, the gates of hell will not overcome my kingdom, my gathering of the saints. And so, that is what is being talked about here. It's so beautiful, this Gog. No one has up to now seemed to realize that Gog is Og. Remember, in Hebrew, it's left to right, or when you're reading, we read from left to right, but in Hebrew it's right to left. So sometimes the first letter gets stuck on the last. Sometimes you have a word that's missing the first. It can still be the same word. And so, Gog and Og is the king of the Rephaim, or the Nephilim, proven there by Ezekiel chapter 38, the same Gog of Magog that's talked about in Revelation chapter 20, who is the king of the governments of this world that's been deceiving and lying to us. So, it's getting pretty interesting. And we're beginning to understand now that this prophecy is deep. And I'm just sitting here trying to think of where to go next because, I don't have any notes here. I'm just going through this briefly to give an outline because over the next few weeks and months, we're going to be going into this in every which way we can think of so that we'll understand it. I don't want to give facts and figures and overwhelm you with thoughts that you can't keep up with. I'm just trying to generally give you the story as to what's really going on, why this Bible is written this way. Why Ezekiel talks about a temple that's not really, they're sacrificing animals in this temple, but yet, according to the Bible, it's going to be the temple that we're going to be using in 1,000 years. Because the new temple, the new heavens and the new earth, doesn't come until after the end of the 1,000 years. Gog and Magog comes at the end of the 1,000 years. And so therefore, the temple of Ezekiel comes before the 1,000 years. And so, it will still be necessary because atonement, when that goat is sacrificed, the Antichrist, that's not the last, they call that the festival of the last great day, atonement, the last great day, but that's in September. There's another holiday that the Jews had after that, and there are 7 holidays. And each of these 7 holidays are ruled over by 7 angels, just like the 7,000 years that we've had and the 7 angels that are in God's hands. And so, this last 1,000 years ends with this a Day of Atonement. But we still got 1,000 years after that, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, where we go in and enter into these tabernacles or booths, and we're protected. We go into the temple, which is the 144,000. And we, the 144,000, gathered unto the earth as a holy priesthood, as living stones, we will be protected in that temple during this 1,000 years from anything. He'll have no authority over us whatsoever. But at the beginning of this 1,000 years, there will be a type of sacrifice, because there will be those who will refuse to love, to have grace, and to enter into the temple and receive instructions and drink from the living waters. Jesus said, "Come and follow me," but most people wouldn't follow him. To this day, when I talk about how all we need to do is receive his grace, most people say, no, Dave. I want justice. I want to go serve the God of vengeance. People can't grasp this. Some people just can't grasp it. So there will be those, yes, this goat Azazel, he will be a sacrifice, just like Jesus was a sacrifice. A slaughter, a willing lamb being led to the slaughter. He willingly took upon himself the sins of the world. And all the sins of all the world was transferred upon him. Well, the Antichrist is not going to be so willing for him. He's going to meet his match. And Christ is going to come at the beginning of the 1,000 years with his saints. The reason we're going to meet him in the air isn't because it doesn't mean we're going to be a rapture. It means that he's going to come down out of the air and meet us on the top of Mount Zion in his kingdom. And together, we're going to have this spiritual battle, because there's a sword that comes out of the mouth of the Lord who's riding on his white horse. And the sword is the sword of the Spirit, the sword of truth. And Christ himself, by the breath of his coming and by the shining and the brightness of his coming, will do away with the Antichrist and the false prophet. But not before this great battle, because they will gather together for this war. It says in chapter 19 of Revelation that there's a war there. Yeah, there's a war at the end of the 1,000 years with Gog and Magog, but there's another war that we're about to go into. And it says that all flesh on the earth is going to be, millions of people are going to be perishing in this great war called Armageddon. Revelation 19:19 says, the beasts and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to wage the war with the one seated upon the horse and with his army. Now, I don't know whether that battle will be, how that's going to be. This is very symbolic. I don't think we're going to be, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. We have a helmet of salvation and the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit. So it'll be a spiritual warfare, and it will be a symbolic sacrifice. But all the sins of the world is going to be put upon the heads of the beast, the false prophet, and the dragon. And they are literal beings, persons. Just as this angel is Peter and Joseph Smith and Adam and Michael, and these are actual persons. So and Jesus was an actual person who was the lamb that took away the sin of the world. So this false prophet, who is a lamb but speaks like the devil, is going to be sacrificed, and all the sins is going to be put upon him. So at the beginning of the 1,000 years, the false prophet, the beast, and the dragon will be thrown into the lake of fire. The nations, many nations, are still not going to know Christ. There may be a few million people on the earth, besides the 144,000 for 1,000 years, that won't have accepted or received God's, maybe they are those that God feels can learn, but not quite yet. But there will be those who will be born during the 1,000 years as well. But then when the dragon, who is an actual person, is resurrected at the end of the 1,000 years, or reincarnated into this world, or whatever, then he'll lead a rebellion, one last rebellion, and that's this rebellion of Gog and Magog. So anyway, we're at the end of an hour here, and I think we've gone into this pretty well today. There's probably still a lot more questions. Sometimes we talk about things and it just makes more questions. But yet it answers a lot, doesn't it? And yet it opens up some more questions. And we'll answer those questions. We're going to dig into this. We're going to figure it all out. All the testimony says that it's not going to be all over in this generation. But one phase is going to come to an end. And the phase that I really think is amazing and that I enjoy so much to think about, which is the gathering of the saints in a brotherhood of love. And the gates of hell will not prevail against it, friends. Anyway, I'm David Vos, so we'll go ahead and end it there, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Have a good one.